Welcome back to The Tipple, short conversations to spark a little bit of longer thinking. Today, I'm joined by Mark Smith and Kate Stables from Whitbread. Mark's not only a senior leader within Whitbread, but also a sponsor of the Women in Tech ERG, and Kate brings deep insight from the intersection of technology, inclusion, and organisational culture. So this conversation today is going to be right at the crossroads of allyship, leadership, and innovation. We'll talk about what allyship looks like when it's active rather than performative, how inclusive intent can translate into both systems and decisions, and why bias doesn't necessarily disappear just because technology gets smarter. So this one's about curiosity, responsibility, and the choices we make as leaders, as allies, and as organisations, when the tools we build start shaping the world around us. Welcome, Kate and Mark. Thank you, both of you.
Thanks for
having us. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So Kate and I had a conversation a while ago when we were talking about the Tipple, and Kate, you said that they should be pod classes, and we talked about maybe doing one in the space of technology, because obviously that's an area you both spend a lot of your working days in. But actually, because it is raising the glass, there's also this intersectionality, I suppose, of the allyship as well, and how that shows up, not just within the drinks industry and the hospitality industry within which you both operate, but also that technology lens, I suppose, which has another dynamic to it. So Mark, I guess if I kick off with, you do sponsor the Women in Tech ERG at Whitbread. It would be great to know a little bit about that and the why for you, I suppose, and then what that active allyship looks like for you in practice when you bring it to life.
So I joined Whitbread 18 months ago, and I previously was the sponsor of the Women in Tech Network at my previous business, SSP Group. And when I arrived here 18 months ago, there was a very early stage Women in Tech network beginning to develop. And I was really, really pleased to be asked to sort of sponsor the network when I arrived. And I think it's really flourished over the course of the last 18 months. There's a lot of the women in the department are now coming together. They're working on their different initiatives, and also working collaboratively with the gender network that we have more broadly in Whitbread, in order to make sure that the intersect of what we're doing in the gender network and also what we're doing in the Women in Tech network is distinct and doesn't overlap too much. So, I mean, what we've been trying to do over the course of the last 18 months is really just trying to promote the female talent within the department, trying to celebrate the kind of achievements, but also trying to encourage the females and women in our department to kind of explore and to push the boundaries. And I think the other thing that I think from my previous time at SSP around allyship is, given in technology that we're probably an industry that has 26% diversity of female talent, it's really important from an allyship perspective to get the male colleagues within the department and the wider industry to act as allies and to support what we do in the network.
We often get asked a lot at Raising the Glass about why it's women and allies in the drinks industry, and it was a really deliberate thing for that reason of a little bit of, I don't want anybody thinking we're doing all this strange stuff behind closed doors and you know, people not feeling included, but also this has to be an industry initiative. It has to be, as you say, that allyship of women and men working together in a space to take those steps forward. You talk a lot about the balance and the things you're doing to bring women in, to grow that talent, to protect that talent, the role that men have within that group. But what have maybe you learned yourself when you've been in rooms where you're not that main beneficiary, where you've stepped in to support the CRG? What's it been like for you?
I was reflecting on this earlier today. So I think probably the moment that I recall most on that was an event probably a couple of years ago, actually, where Salesforce brought together a Women in Tech network event as part of International Women's Day. And I was fortunate to be invited to that session. And there was probably about 50 people in the room, of which there were 5 men. And I felt deeply, deeply uncomfortable in that group. Mm-hmm. I was proud to be there as a male ally, but it did make me sort of realize how it feels for women, particularly in the kind of tech and data sector, that are surrounded by the majority of men, and actually what can we do as male allies in order to continue to promote that and also promote it from the ground up. So I mean, I think part of the opportunity that we have within tech and data is really trying to encourage new entry into the sector. That could be new entry at the kind of apprenticeship or graduate level, but also returning mothers that have taken time out, and looking for every opportunity in order to just try and get that more balanced portfolio. Because I'm a real believer that the diversity of thought that you have in decision making helps you to drive the better delivery of a product or the better delivery of a guest experience. And when you're working in a consumer organization, as I have all my life, we're developing products and services for customers that are typically 50-50. And therefore that bias that sometimes can show up in the way that we think about those products and services is much more balanced if you can then get that diversity of thought on lots of dimensions, of gender being one, but there's many other dimensions that also you need to consider. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that it really was a moment for me of realizing how it feels for many women working in tech and data, that it does make you feel kind of slightly uncomfortable, and I think going through that experience really helped.
We've had feedback like that before in the Raising the Glass forum, where men have said, I've said I'd come with my team, and if I'm the only man in the room, I'm going to leave. I'm like, wow, now you know how some women feel. Yeah, I will still sit in rooms and be able to count on one hand the number of women in that room with me. You talked about bringing talent in, but also bringing talent back. And Kate, maybe one for you, because I know when I came back from parental leave, and I'm not thinking just about parental leave, I'm thinking about anybody that's been out of an organisation for a period of time, you're aware that business moves on, the organisation changes. But I'm guessing there's another dynamic, particularly now with just the pace of innovation when it comes to tech, that there's probably needs to be even more awareness of how you're bringing people back in when they've been out for a period of time, because there must be a huge change curve there.
Yeah, I think it even applies when you're bringing new people into the business, full stop. But yeah, I think you've got to create an environment that somebody feels they can put their hand up and say what they think, and that kind of psychological safety, but also creating moments and making sure you've got the right voices in the room to have that consistency across the board. Might have stepped into the next question.
Well, yes and no. I think you're right. I think that's psychological safety. I've always said to people, when you're coming back, you sometimes need to think it's like starting a new job. But Lottie was on the first podcast talking about the expense system changed when she was out on maternity leave, and she came back in as a senior leader, and there was this period of that, for whatever reason, the psychological safety for her wasn't there to say, I don't know how to use the expense system, and that just shakes you to your core sometimes. But I think, to your point, that question around moving into how do you take an employee resource group from being a nice to have, something that we sit in and we discuss and then we'll come back again next month and the month after, to being that true engine of change, because that's what they're there. That's why people are supporting them. That's why people are in the room. So, Kate, what helps, I suppose, it move from discussions and conversation to change and influence?
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit on the sort of sponsorship in terms of what Mark's doing from a Women in Tech. So I think that applies across the board, making sure you've got that active sponsorship, not somebody just sort of having their name over it. And you see that in, it's being involved in the conversation and bringing ideas to the table from the sponsor in terms of actively providing for that. I think there's tools that are needed in order to help with that. So providing budget where needed, or inviting those groups into conversations and decision making, and helping to inform policy and everything that comes off the back of it. So there's lots of ways to move it from, I think typically or historically I've seen it where it can be about celebrating the events, and it's, you know, it's the tick box on an International Women's Day. You don't see that more broadly now, where you've got that right sponsorship and it's coming from the strategy of the business ultimately to make sure we're doing the right things.
Yeah, I mean, just building on that, I think also, look, I mean, I'm in a privileged position. I think also it's about me using my influence and responsibility in order to try and unlock capability and unlock opportunity for people. I mean, we were having a conversation recently with our Women in Tech team about there is a policy that means that Whitbread can't do X, Y, and Z. And actually, I don't think that policy exists. I think it's mind talk. And actually, my encouragement was, look, let's go out, let's move that particular thing forward. I don't see any reason why we can't do that, and therefore I will then support you in order to try and move that particular initiative forward. So I think that it's also about trying to, again, use my network. I mean, a lot of our tech suppliers have massive women in tech networks.
Yeah.
And actually, how do you then reach into the broader industry, reach into the broader tech supply base, and encourage them to come in and support us with some of those things? And what I've found over the years in doing those things is there's lots and lots of people that are out there that are willing to come into your organization in order to provide talks, experience, panel events. So I think that the opportunity to use those kind of networks to be able to then encourage the internal team is where I think I can take a role and really support them in order to try and move things forward. And the other thing I'd just say, building on your return to work or parental leave point, is I think tech is also a space where it is innovating and it is moving forward, and therefore the skills that are required need to be refreshed quite frequently anyway, and therefore that as an opportunity to use that to reskill and to bring different people is a real opportunity to access new talent.
Let's talk about technology moving forward. Let's talk about AI. Just probably need to caveat, we are not going to give anybody advice on how to use AI brilliantly for whatever it is you want to use AI for. My children tell me to stop naming my AI tool, but Jennifer's great. She helps me a lot. However, I'm going to tell you a story about when Jennifer didn't really get it right, because I would love to get your views on it with your experience. So there's a lot of people asking AI at the moment to generate an image for them, and that it would be an image that AI has generated based on its perception. And the reason why it's happening a lot at the minute is because a lot of women are asking AI to do it, and AI is creating an image of a man. So I asked Jennifer to do it, and do you know what? Credit where it's due. She didn't give me an image of a man, probably because of a lot of the work I do in raising the glass. But what came back was an image of a brunette woman with brown eyes. And Jennifer and I sat down and had a little conversation about it. And I asked Jennifer why she thought I had brown hair and brown eyes. And she talked to me about the place that I talk about in terms of warm, empathic leadership, and that therefore this was a representative image. And when we dug a little bit deeper and I explained that probably wasn't representative, it does anchor back to the bias that is already in the system and the coding, and the images are coded to say that this is a woman in a leadership role, and therefore she's a warm, empathic leader. Now, there's already a bias that we're very conscious of, which is there are less women in leadership roles than men. So she's probably got a few less images to scrape through. And then there is a genetic bias of, we know that brown hair is more prevalent than blonde hair. So it's not surprising when you apply the logic that something would go through a system and look at all of the images that are coded and go, this is why. But it's a massive bias in the system built in, because the system can only go on what it has already had, which is bias. So Where do you think we might be underestimating bias like that in the drinks industry and the hospitality industry? And how do we manage that bias? Because now it's not just human bias, it's technological bias potentially.
Yeah, look, I think it is a real concern. And I think fundamentally, when you get to the core of the AI opportunity and the AI challenge, it comes back to data. I similarly have used those, can you generate me an image of X, Y, or Z? And I did one last year for the team, for me going into an away day. I asked it to create a picture of a CTO outside a Premier Inn hotel. And it created a beautiful, chiseled, smart, dark-haired.
So practically like for like.
Exactly. So, I mean, I had to go through several iterations in order to get it to look more accurate in terms of bolder, fatter man. I think fundamentally it does come back to the data. And I think that for us creating AI products and AI services in the drinks industry, what you've got to make sure is that you are building those and also making sure that you continually test them and you continually iterate them in order to make sure that those biases don't come in without the appropriate level of governance. And I think also you need to retrain the AI. So, I mean, the fact that you went through that iteration of saying, well, why did you do that? Hopefully then the next time it tries to generate that image, it will think about it.
Yeah, and she did say, she actually said, thank you very much, because this is what we're, and I think that's quite important. When you have people who aren't necessarily working with technology as much, just that little, us as humans having that understanding of, we are now putting more data points into the system. So challenging that gives another data point for AI to build on that reiterative process.
There's a really big education, isn't there, across the board in terms of every user that you have in the business needs to understand what the potential is, but also how to harness that in the right way. So you're never going to, be kind of putting something in and then accepting that the first answer might be right as it stands in terms of where we are from a maturity perspective with Gen. Yeah.
And I think also with AI, we are in a little bit of a hype cycle with AI at the moment. You're sort of in a situation where the answer is AI, what is the question? Mm-hmm. And actually AI isn't always the right solution to many of the problems that you're actually trying to solve for. So we've got to, as a wider tech organization, determine where the right solutions need to be deployed in order to maximize the benefits. And also being really mindful, I think, in those customer facing interactions where the brand is at most risk if you get that particular interaction wrong with the guest or with the customer, that you are really, really training the model and you're iterating that model and making sure that it is fit for purpose, and you are trying to engineer the bias out of the system. But as I say, if I go back to the root of it is the data, and therefore understanding what data set it is that it's sitting over, so that you are in control of that data set and you're clear as to the data set that it's using is really, really important.
We're all humanizing AI. Some not as much as me. Some haven't named theirs yet. But you said there, Kate, around almost stress testing in not letting it be the first answer. Because if you're having a discussion with somebody at work about, I've got this idea, what do you think? That collaboration and that stress testing is really, really healthy. And I think, there's almost that element of knowing that you can do that with AI and strengthen. It's not a bad tool. It frightens me that we are living in a generation where the first image that it shows you is an image of you looking chiseled. Interestingly, my brown-haired woman was middle-aged and curvaceous and not, perhaps what AI would set up but again, that's probably something to do with the data set that was put in. But you've got children accessing this as a tool. And again, I have children. I can't imagine what it is like being a child growing up where everything has a filter that you don't necessarily know about. Everything has a data point forming what you're seeing on the screen. It's really hard on a personal level to balance the benefit that tools give us versus some of the concerns that they might provide.
Yeah, there's a real task in that to build that out. And it, coming to your point in terms of the way that we're training out that bias and thinking about that then becomes even more important, that you've got that diverse point of view where you're looking at that. So Mark mentioned the customer, our guest view. We need to make sure that we understand what they're looking for and co-design what that will all end up looking like with every impacted person in that mix. So really important that we bring those in.
And I think it also comes back to education as well, and it is that, again, my children also are avid users of AI and use it a lot for their homework and research and things like that. But they're also very mindful of the sustainability impact.
Yes,
and the sort of carbon and energy related challenges that it can cause as well. So I think that education is going to need to evolve, and we're going to have to bring not only ourselves but also our kids through that, and get them to be a bit more critical in the way that they explore the responses to these things, in order to make sure that they're not just taking the first answer and they are looking for the additional clarity that they need in order to get to the right answer, or the right research that they're trying to do.
Education is normally kind of at the root of a lot of the things we talk about, and I suppose we may be answering this question before I ask it, but there is something in allyship. A lot of people want to be better allies. A lot of people want to step forward into this space. I don't think a lot of what happens necessarily happens nefariously. I think it does happen from whether it's systemic or this fear of, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to cause offense. I don't want to get it wrong. How do we help organizations and individuals move past that fear into that space of learning to, I guess, improve the situation for everybody?
I think sometimes you've got to say it. I don't want to say the wrong thing, and just be open and honest. And you create, like, in my opinion, you create that by having those open conversations. I think we've talked about this realm a lot in terms of how you enable that environment of safety is by almost a little bit by making yourself unsafe before you've got that safety there, by sharing as much as you can and saying I'm being aware that you can get it wrong, but it's okay, and to help everybody through that ultimately.
Look, I mean, I think again it is hard, because often, I've been sat in conversations where, again, you are a little bit frightened about saying the wrong thing. Yeah. Some of it is about relationship, and some of it is about, I think, time. And actually, hopefully, I would like to think that the more people get to know me, they realise that I'm not inclined one way or the other, and therefore I'm trying to do it in the most rounded ways possible. And therefore, you'd maybe get a little more forgiveness if you do say the wrong thing, because you've built that foundational relationship. Whereas if you're in a specific conversation, which is the first time interaction, then you might have that risk. But I think that, again, for me, it comes back to authenticism around making sure that you are having open conversations, and you're trying to understand everybody's perspectives, and you're also reaching in and looking for the person that maybe not speaking up, in order to try and bring those people in and get those points of view, to encourage them, and as Kate said, doing that in a way that you're encouraging that they can't get it wrong if they do say something correct. This is a safe space to say it.
I think it is about safe spaces. I think it is about recognizing positive intent. There is a difference between somebody saying, I don't quite know the right way to phrase this, or I don't want to, but I'm trying to improve, versus it coming from a different place. And I guess that authenticity is that consistency. You're consistently showing up in the same space, in the same way, with that positive intent. That's got to be what makes the difference, right?
Yeah, I think that positive intent is easier to demonstrate if you've got that relationship for a longer period of time, and people have seen that there is a history of that positive intent. But I think that as long as you, as Kate said, you're framing what you're about to say, so that if it does cause offence, it's not something that is meant. I think goes a long way, and I think that encouraging the kind of allyship side of things from a male perspective in this case is I think a lot of men don't really know what it is and how to help. I mean, we had a gentleman called Lee Chambers came in to run a session with us last year, which was really helpful. We got really good attendance, and I think that I've found that actually these women in tech networks can actually be a real catalyst for bringing male and females together, rather than it being it's just a female specific thing. And actually, you can then break down those barriers and then open up those conversations a lot more.
Having that sponsor along that with you helps you do that, because you are allowing people to kind of almost show vulnerability in terms of opening up that conversation. There's
definitely been a lot of change. Some of that has come from psychological safety. Some of that has probably come from some of the discomfort we're talking about. But it's fair to say there is still a lot of change that needs to happen. So if you were to fast forward 5 years, have this conversation, look back on what had happened, what would good look like for you then when it comes to allyship, when it comes to inclusion in the technology space, in the hospitality space, and I guess a bit more broader? What does good look like?
While metrics aren't the be-all and end-all of everything, I do think trying to encourage more female talent into tech and data is a really important thing for us to try and measure that, and also making sure that that's done in the right way as well. Because I think sometimes what ends up happening is we recruit females into this particular area, but not that particular area, and we just end up with that gender diversity being out of sync in sub functions. So I think having more female talent into tech and data is a good metric. I think having more female talent like Kate in leadership positions is really important, because I think you then generate more role models, and I think the more role models that you can have, the more people then can aspire to do the roles that Kate has done and Kate is doing. And I think that's really important. And I think that I think from a male perspective, I think that it will be, and it's difficult to measure this, but I think males feel comfortable being allies of females, and it's part of the natural support mechanism that exists. But I also think that it's about females being supportive of males too. Yes, I think it has to be a two-way street, and I think ultimately this comes back to one-to-one relationships, and actually the gives and gets from both of those things. And I think that for me is what success would look like over 5 years is more female talent working within the industry, more leadership talent, and actually this just becoming part of the DNA and the culture of the organisation and of the industry.
That's the future. That's 5 years, 10 years. That's what we're working on now to get there. But if we break it down for anybody listening, what's the one thing people can do today? What can you go out and do that really starts making that difference?
I think there's small things, Ron, that everybody can do every day that will make a massive difference. Just asking who should be in the room, encouraging those quieter voices, creating the psychological safety that we've talked about makes really a big difference over time, and will really layer into change in the future.
I agree.
I would add a final point, which is around, because we've talked about it a lot, we've talked about allyship, but I suppose allyship is another example of your network and how you support it. And you've talked a lot about those relationships. So it'd be remiss of me not to talk about the power of mentoring and being a mentor and a mentee in formulating those relationships, in building them. And again, that thought diversity you talked about, Mark, it's not always from the forums you're sat in those ERGs. Sometimes it's about bringing in other experiences as well when those people aren't quite at the table yet.
I agree. And I think it is about reaching out and using the broadest network possible. I think in anything that you're doing, sometimes you can become a bit insular. We're working here at Whitbread. We're thinking about creating products and services for Premier Inn. We kind of get a group of people who work for Whitbread and Premier in a room in order to try and work some of those things out. But actually, there are broader perspectives of many people who stay at Premier Inn all over the country every single day, that actually you can reach in and get those perspectives. And I think just trying to broaden that network and broaden that thinking is a real help. And I think if you apply that also to what we said about the ERG, is again broaden the perspectives and just open up the networks for people to try and reach in and to work through where those support networks exist and where that collateral to be able to help move some of these things forward is.
And I guess we're full circle, right? We're back to the beginning. We're about that thought diversity. We're about that broad voices, and ultimately it's really simple, right? It's about representation, and you can't get the output without getting the representative input.
Yeah, agreed.
Mark, Kate, thank you ever so much for giving up some of your very busy day to chat about all things technology, all things representative, all things diverse, and particularly the conversation on allyship. You've talked about it in the session, Mark. It's really important that we're not just talking about women's voices all the time. That allyship bit is so important to the work that we're trying to do. So thank you, both of you, so much for your time today.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
This has been a conversation about, I suppose, intention meeting reality, and the reminder that allyship isn't static. It evolves as the systems evolve around us. Thank you, as always, for checking in. This has been The Tipple. Thank you for staying curious with us.